Hello and welcome to the Hard Questions. I'm Solomon Serwanja. President Yoweri Museveni last week made a reshuffle in cabinet and within the army. He has dropped General Mbadi from the Chief of Defense Forces and replaced him with General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, the first son. General Muhoozi now is going to be leading Uganda's People's Defense Forces. Also, he has dropped Lieutenant General Relu and replaced him with Lieutenant General Samuel Okiding as the Deputy Chief of Defense Forces. Leopold Chanda has been dropped from the Joint Chief of Staff. We will put some context on those reshuffles for you, including dropping top ministers, including ministers from Karamoja, Agnes Nandutu and the Honorable Chitutu, and of course being replaced by new faces there. We're going to be putting some context to what that means for Uganda's politics, but also ahead of the 2026 general elections. On the show today, I'm excited to be seated amongst greatness. I have Timothy Kalyegira, who is a veteran journalist and political analyst. He's also the CEO at Kampala Express. Timothy, it's good to have you on the show. Thank you so much for accepting to make time to be on the show today.
Well, thank you, Solomon. And greetings to the viewers.
Tim, let's just start off with, I think we should start off with the reshuffle within the military. The appointment of General Muhoozi Kainerugaba and dropping General Mbadi Mbaswa. And of course, he was appointed Minister for Trade. What do you make of the reshuffle within the army? Let's start off position by position. Let's start with the appointment of General Muhoozi Kainerugaba as the Chief of Defense Forces.
Well, as the media, by and large, and most political analysts have viewed it, if you saw the newspaper front pages and listened to radio TV, the view was, wow, this is finally the thing we've been waiting for the last 20 years, which is the stepping stone to power and state house. And my view was contrary to that. My view being that, as I asked on one of these talk shows of ours last week, I said, when has Muhoozi never been the CDF? Over the last 20 years or so, for all intents and purposes, those who understand the Ugandan Armed Forces, he's essentially been some CDF. The structure of the Ugandan Army has really been, to put it a bit crudely, President Museveni as the commander-in-chief, symbolically because he's president, but also what you'd, for lack of a better word, you'd call the supreme leader of the Uganda Armed Forces in a hands-on, practical way, different from the ceremonial position of commander-in-chief. The deputy to President Museveni, in the role I've described, this sort of like field marshal of the army, the supreme or the military overall commander, is General Salim Saleh. And then next to that, for all intents and purposes, for those who know Uganda's recent history, has been Muhoozi Kainerugaba, when he was still an officer in the Presidential Guard Brigade, and then later the commander of Special Forces Brigade, and even as a special advisor to the president. So in real terms, if you want to describe Uganda's history, not pretend to go by official charts, that's what it is. So just to recap, President Museveni as the commander-in-chief by virtue of his position as head of state, but also as the effective, actual, operational, supreme commander of Uganda's armed forces, deputized by his brother General Salim Saleh. And in third position, for all intents and purposes, and effectively, is Muhoozi Kainerugaba. So going back to your question, so those who don't know this will look at this and say, you see, that's the next step, the one we've always been anticipating. And after this man is being prepared to succeed his father. My view is no, he's been in that role from the time he was a lieutenant colonel. As I did mention on our talk show KFM last week, even when he was a lieutenant colonel in the army fresh from Sandhurst, army generals at State House used to salute him, believe it or not. So to Muhoozi, to his father and to his uncle, nothing has changed. It's just a title that's been all in name has finally been fixed to him.
Why would you say that? Because, I mean, we have had General Mbadi, who is the chief of defense forces. There was the deputy CDF, who is General Relu. And the army structure has been clear, the joint chief of staff. And so even when he was the commander of the land's forces at the time, there was a superstructure that the UPDF is trying to be professional as it is. And therefore, in the military, they follow command. But you're speaking to the contrary, that even with these structures, you're saying that General Muhoozi has already been in charge of the army.
I am saying that under this group of revolutionaries called the NRM, NRA, there has never been structure in the sense that civil servants, corporate executives, and other people who trained and work in formal institutions understand. It's never been that way. So if the appearance of a structure with positions is put out there, one, for the public, usually the politics, the prime ministers from Uganda, vice presidents from Busoga, Kaziwe, deputy speaker of parliament is, deputy prime minister is from West Nile, so we're represented. That's put out there to placate and make the country feel comfortable. As John Kazora's book did mention of that meeting, if you've heard of it, when President Museveni is, sarcastically meeting the Ankole parliamentary group and saying, do you really think the army commander, J.J. Dong, can really move troops and whatnot? You might have heard that story. So under the Museveni's,
is that in the Betrayed by My Leader?
Exactly. Major John Kazora's book, he mentions that there's a meeting at Electoral and the president sarcastically really just saying, you think Kaziwe, Speciuza Kaziwe is really a vice president? In other words, he's trying to show that true power is not what it appears to be. So these people here, where that comes from, long story, but these two people, Paul Kagame of Rwanda and Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, came up with this understanding of a guerrilla war that is also very heavily steeped in psychological warfare. So in the NRM structure, where Yusuf Le's Uganda Freedom Fighters merges with Yoweri Museveni's Popular Resistance Army in June 1981 to create what we now know as the NRM-NRA, Yusuf Le, the former president in 1979, is the chairman of the NRM movement. Then Yoweri Museveni is the vice chairman and chairman of the High Command. So that was the idea, to get this group of people who mostly were from Western Uganda, Ankole, and some Banyarwanda refugees, given a national legitimacy. You have the popular former president, Yusuf Le, to be the face of the organization, Dr. Samson Kiseka, the external coordinator, but also a respected Muganda doctor, but the real power is in the High Command. 1990, same thing with the RPF. Alexis Kanyerengwe, a Hutu, formerly with President Juvenal Habyarimana's government, who falls out with him, is made the chairman of the RPF, the vice chairman of the RPF, but chairman of the High Command, which is where the real power is Major General Paul Kagame. So that's the general thinking. The thinking is, we fight our battles, we do our politics, we do our political positioning to appeal to the public, but then we know power is elsewhere. 1979, Yusuf Le is president, Godfrey Binaisa is president, but the military commission is headed by Paulo Mwanga, and on that military commission is where the real power of Uganda is, which is why when Godfrey Binaisa attempts to transfer Brigadier David Oyetojok to ambassador to Algeria, and Yoweri Museveni as Minister of Regional Cooperation, the two say, my friend, this is not the way you do this, and he's removed from power. So that's a background to the way they think. He does not think and does not act structure in the way you're describing it. So take it out of your mind, dear viewers, that this army is structured in the way that you see. The actual head of intelligence, domestically, ISO, might not be the director general that you see on the outside, but might be some lieutenant colonel who even sits outside of Uganda or is based like in Jinja. Just that. And many people have come to understand this, which is why you keep seeing musicians, politicians, delegations, ambassadors going to Gulu to meet A1 General Salim Saleh. And by the way, on Monday night, if you go through Twitter, you might have seen Karen Mugisha, your colleague, posting, like breaking news. The handover from General Mbadi to General Kainerugaba is going to take place in Gulu at the home of General Salim Saleh. anchor to the CDF, the home of, not Gulu 4th Division Barracks headquarters, the home near the Gulu airstrip of General Salim Saleh. So much for structure in the army. So that answers your question.
Let's just take a deep dive still on that. One of the things that came to my mind when you're talking is the standby class 1, which to date many people are still asking why General Elwelu pulled the plug. There are sections within the army that argued that there were contrary commanders coming from 2 different groups, and therefore that is why there was that standby class 1. There were conversations that the chain of command wasn't very streamlined, and I think that has come up very clearly, that commands were coming from parallel sides. Is that what you are trying to paint?
To just give some background to viewers to what Solomon said, that tension around the standby orders class 1 took place in July 2022 when President Museveni had gone to Kigali to attend the Commonwealth Summit. Now, every time the president leaves the country, regardless of even that incident in July 2022, every time flies out of the country, the army is put under that, standing order number 1. Essentially, they are put in a slightly heightened state of readiness. It's just routine. Wherever he goes, all these flights, all these foreign trips he does, that order is always given. We never get to see that. Now, why this comes to the public is that General Elwelu now gives that order. And then the first son, Muhoozi, countermands that, essentially like he just like pours water on it, rejects it, announces on. And that shows some people that there's tension among these people. So the person in line of structure who should have given that order, which is routine every time the president leaves the country, there wasn't like a coup attempt or anything, just routine in the army, Muhoozi countermands it. And that causes a crisis, which then gets everybody talking. The president returns by road from Kigali, and you might remember holds a high command meeting in Tungamo to address these and other tensions in the army. Now, the fact that that can happen, the fact that the person in formal line of structure, command structure, can issue the formal orders, and then they are sort of like overruled by Muhoozi Kainerugaba in that year, 2022, that unforgettable year, when every 3 or 4 days he entertained us with all sorts of tweets and opinions, tells you what I'm just explaining, which tells you that, unknown to many in the public, he has been essential operations day-to-day commanding officer of the Ugandan Armed Forces since a few years after he returned from Sandhurst Royal Military Academy.
What is the dropping of Erelu? What do you read into the dropping of, first of all, the shift of General Mbasombadi to trade?
In the thinking of President Museveni, all of us are just citizens, soldiers, aides, hands, supporters, faces to be deployed as and when he deploys them. It doesn't really matter where he puts them. You might as well ask how come the former CDF, General Edward Katuma Mala,
Minister of Works,
Minister of Works, what seems to be completely unconnected. So to him,
Nyakarima was sent to internal affairs, which is fair enough.
Okay,
the late Nyakarima.
In a broad sense of security, yes, but still, these are people who shouldn't be entering. If this is supposed to be a civilian government, these are people who shouldn't be, especially when they're still serving officers, deployed in these line cabinet positions. But now, President Museveni is an arch cynic. He really just sees through all of us. He's been through that. People like him, these guerrilla leaders, when they become presidents, are really just cynical people. Him, his friend Paul Kagame, Vladimir Putin of Russia. Intelligence officers who become presidents, they know the game behind the screen. They know it's not what it seems to be. They know that when I am seated somewhere, seeming to be, enjoying a picnic with friends in Ginger, if you look carefully, we're actually planning, a rebel event. That's the way the RPF was formed at a wedding. That's all other story I can give you. The way the NRM was formed. These ordinary parties that took place in Bugolobi flats and whatnot, the day before Kabamba is attacked, the things from Museveni's home at Prince Charles Drive in Kololo are moved by Andrew Lutaya and the late, Jolly Sabuni to the Buganda Road flats and whatnot. In other words, they know that away from what we seem to be doing in the public, so much takes place behind the scenes. So to answer your question, to him, it's just, what do we live for? There's no conviction among most of us. I can get you as CDF, make you military attaché in Addis Ababa, can switch you to Minister of State for Trade, can, think of a vacant place. There is Uganda's mission at the UN in Geneva has no head of mission. Fine, send him there. Why? Because it doesn't really matter to him. You will get your salary, your per diem. He knows, like what you've been seeing on the recent parliamentary crisis. For all this talk of politics and all this talk of transforming the government, many of us are still what Chris Obore at the Monitor used to call Meria Lero, really just living day by day handouts, per diem, claims in the office. So to him, title doesn't matter. Make him Minister of State for Trade, but keep him on the same salary as old. Parliament impeaches passes Namuganza, but somehow ignore Parliament, keep as a minister. That sort of thing. He is not in his mind limited by this sense of constitutionalism, formalism, documentation. So that's the way he lives.
Do you think, can you just get into his mind and read into the appointment of Muhoozi Kainerugaba as CDF, especially from your view, there must be a reason as to why he appoints him?
I have given the opinion, surprising many people, criticized by many people, and raised some eyebrows. After his rally, or what the PLU called the Baraza in Masaka, that Saturday, last Saturday, 23rd, I said that, just before it, I did a kind of look forward to 2020, the week that just ended, and I said that Muhoozi Kainerugaba it has finally dawned on Muhoozi Kainerugaba that for all his bluster and all his power and everything, he's just the son of his father. And he's only as powerful as the fact of being the first son. And to go directly to your answer, there's been like tension in the first family over Muhoozi and his behavior. The birthday party and all this. No one will stop me from tweeting what I want. You remember that? Bold capital letters, making the president apologize to Kenyans and all this. The president, because of his experience and his acting abilities, can look very calm in public, even when he's exceptionally irritated by something. So he's really being driven mad by his son. In the public, comes out and says, he's a cadre, I apologize for what he said, Ugandan Kenyan friends, but inside is boiling, but doesn't show it. So that behavior by Muhoozi has been causing tensions in the family. The week after his birthday dinner at State House, 2022, remember when President Kagame arrived, I wrote in my Sunday Monitor column the argument that unlike what most people think, this birthday party and this whole jamboree of Muhoozi at 48 took the first family by surprise. And it actually began as a joke. If you go through his timeline, it just starts like around January saying, hey, people, I turned 48 this year. How about, I throw an East African birthday bash. That's first an East African thing. But really as a casual joke. And then, but because of who he is, all the wheels, all the, hangers on, all the aides around him, the Balams and all the others start actually creating a party. And that's what happens. And the family still takes it like a joke. It's like a joke and whatnot. Until they finally discover, hey, you mean President Kagame is coming? Yes. And then they have to scramble and then prepare for that. And my argument was that every time there is a family event of the Musevenis, of an intimate, formal nature, Christmas, Easter, New Year, and that sort of thing, the First Lady usually wears that traditional Ankole dress. If you saw the photograph, she was just dressed like, some weekend skirt, blouse, and whatnot. And that, Museveni, yes, will dress anyway, but the First Lady usually, those events, family events, baptism, party, wedding, it's always the Ankole traditional wear. So Muhoozi just takes the first family by surprise, and in comes Kagame. It's like, well, if a president is coming, this now is different. So they scramble and have that event. But if you listen to the president's speech at State House, he was very careful to speak in third-party language. he addressed President Muhoozi and said, I recommend the friendship between you and President Kagame. He did not make it seem as if this is us. It was third party. You two, I see, are becoming friends. I commend the friendship. It was like, this seems to be about you, and we're hosting you. So that birthday party was not sanctioned by the first family. And to quickly get to your point, if you notice through all these events around his birthday, all the trips around the country, be it MK movement or PLU, there is no sibling of Muhoozi. There's no Natasha, Diana, Patience. You don't see the first lady, you don't see the president. You might say, yes, but they're busy. But you remember when Patience, the daughter, had a church event, I think in Gulu or Kitgum, when the first couple, president, first lady, actually went to grace the occasion. And you'd think if they were behind this Muhoozi activity, surely at least one of them, none of them, not the parents, not the siblings. So unknown to the public, this whole Muhoozi and his birthday parties and everything embarrasses them. Like I wrote in the Monitor, those people, for all their weaknesses, they are quite conservative people. Their birthdays tend to be local. If you notice, every time the first lady's birthday comes, a mention on social media, a thank you, a cutting the cake and nothing. You never see any flowers, events, people at her birthday party. Museveni's birthday, a mention on social media, that's it. Christmas, it's only recently because of social media we see those Raktura photos, he under the tree with his grandchildren and whatnot. But their intimate events, those big events of their lives, the Christian festivals and the birthdays are always low-key. So this thing called Muhoozi's birthday as a national event with roads closed off and billboards everywhere was completely out of character of the first family, and it really annoyed and embarrassed them. So inside of that is the tension we're talking about. So just leap forward to the story. This thing we see as MK movement, PLU, has been annoying and dividing the first family. And therefore, the being appointed as CDF, in my opinion, which I stand by, is not so much a demotion, but a containment. So as I did post on Twitter, you might have seen it where I said, Museveni has been trying to deal with this problem called Muhoozi. A very serious problem, by the way, really dividing the first family and causing so much pain among them. So the idea was, okay, what we're going to do, we're going to take him away from this special advisor state, because it was kind of amorphous. When he was a special advisor, he was neither here nor there, half civilian, half politician, half free agent and whatnot. So what we do, let's just tie him down to the full-time CDF job, 8 to 5 every day of the year. And then get some of his key people behind the PLU and MK movement, also put them in the cabinet, now leave them confused. Now, if you want to see how crafty Museveni's mind works, that's what it is. So get all those Balams, Lele, Beres, and the others, make them ministers. So now they themselves, first of all, have now full-time jobs, and now all the actions are bound by the cabinet. So, as I said on Twitter, he basically moved to disband this whole rubbish called Muhoozi and his parties and rallies and whatnot. And that's how it becomes a CDF, as a punishment, not as a promotion, as most people think.
Other people think that President Museveni is, when it comes to power, he doesn't take anything for granted.
There's not, remember in 2008, 2006, when the Crown Prince of, Nepal, opened fire on his whole family. Viewers can check this. The Crown Prince of Nepal opened fire and killed, I think, 13 or 12 members of his whole family. In 1975, the King of Saudi Arabia, King Faisal, was assassinated by his own nephew. And the way, this Kanye West way that Muhoozi has been behaving, if a person is writing all these erratic tweets and whatnot, you just don't know what happens. A source tells me, even when he's going to be the president, he's disarmed. So in other words, I'm just trying to say that when someone starts behaving that way, you just can't take chances. So Crown Prince of Nepal, King Faisal, assassinated by his own nephew inside the palace. These things happen in families. So that's what happened.
President is just, like you said, doesn't take anything for chances. You have a son who is saying, I have to be on the ballot. You have a son who says, your time is up, old people, it's time for the young people to take.
Dismissing the NRM.
Yeah, you have a son who is dismissing the NRM and calling them crafty and all that. And he's a threat to power, like it or not. And some people have argued that what the president did is to just put an end to his political ambitions and keep it quiet.
By the way, I don't want to reveal too much, but you'll be very surprised to discover one day that the president had actually wanted this 2021 to 26 term to be his last one. That's what it was supposed to have been, until Muhoozi becomes the Muhoozi of Twitter. And then all his plans suddenly are changed. And then so he has to run in 2026 reluctantly. And also, it's no longer guaranteed that Muhoozi will be his successor in the way we think, which is why on Twitter I asked the question last week, have anybody in Uganda analytical circles noticed that the day of the Masaka rally is the day Odrek Rawogo flies with the Minister of Justice, Norbert Mao, to Addis Ababa to meet the Prime Minister. Now, once again, if you know Uganda, Norbert Mao take a message from President Museveni to Prime Minister Abiy of Ethiopia is understandable. But why Odrek? He's not a member of the cabinet, he's not a member of the government. But as explained earlier, in Museveni world, it's not the title that you have. It is a true reporting power to him. So, as I said sarcastically on Twitter, it really was a trip of Odrek to Addis Ababa. But since you can't appear among foreign capitals without any title, I mean, who are you in the structure? In some of these serious countries, it's government to government, official to official. So to disguise the fact that it really was Odrek, Norbert Mao goes to accompany Odrek, but appearing like head of delegation. Why have I brought up the Odrek case? It is that, another thing, let me just tease your mind. In the last 8 or so years, who has been sounding out this whole patriotism story? Not Odrek?
It's Odrek.
Odrek. Why does the movement, the MK movement, move from NK movement to Patriotic League of Uganda? Why does it copy Odrek? Think about it for a second, but the answer is Muhoozi is beginning to sense there are 2 balloons being put up by the first family, which to me is the true Uganda government and the true UPDF High Command. 2 balloons are being floated to test which of them flies best, and that's the balloon they might decide on to be the successor. One balloon is Muhoozi Kainerugaba, and the other balloon is Odrek Rawogo. And I think when the MK movement senses that indisciplined behavior, that arrogance, when Muhoozi has been offending his father and all this, and they sense that the momentum might be heading toward Odrek, they almost subconsciously start aping Odrek. That PLU, change of name, itself hinted that, hey, Muhoozi, don't assume you're the heir by birthright. The momentum is shifting to the other person called Odrek, and that's what happened.
Do you think that the mobilization, the political mobilization that General Muhoozi has been having alongside his allies will continue, even in the position of the CDF?
Once again, back to the Masaka rally. All along since his birthday, it has always been me, next leader, me, the greatest, I this, I that, I ABC. If you listen carefully to his speech in Masaka, or at least you read the text, there's a different Muhoozi. One, for the first time in all this Muhoozi business, for the very first time, his wife Charlotte appears alongside him. Think back, not the birthday party in 2022, none of these events has his wife appeared. For the very first time, Charlotte, his wife, appears with him. And then what is he telling people in Masaka? He's not focusing the light on himself. He's saying, don't vote corrupt leaders, support the president's programs, support the president. In others, Muhoozi is now focusing the light and the glory, like the John the Baptist to Jesus. It's not me you turn to, it's he. I'm only the one that baptizes him. What had happened? By then, Muhoozi had got the hint of, Muhoozi, your days as this free-wheeling Kanye West kind of person are over. And it's interesting how Charlotte does not seem to have caught on this. So when Charlotte is at Masaka, she doesn't seem to know a reshuffle is coming, but I already know that's coming. So she's talking about, my husband here, all the years I've known him, he's a very patriotic person, all these things. But Muhoozi, I think, has got a hint that this might be the last rally of PLU. So he's now being the good son. It's no longer about me, it's about the president, support the president. I've come as an emissary, as an envoy of the president to you people of Masaka, not me. So all those Frank Gashumbas, Balams, David Kabandas, and the others are running alongside, like, are clueless about what's coming. And that's why I told people, I said, remember what I told you last week about Masaka? Masaka was the farewell trip of PLU and taking Muhoozi back to the barracks. Basically, it was the purging of Muhoozi and his group.
Go back to the barracks, you're a military
Back to
soldier,
things,
concentrate.
just
You
go
don't
back
look
to
at it as a
day-
promotion.
It is, but as I said, as I asked at the beginning of the interview, when has Muhoozi never been the CDF? For those who really know Uganda.
All right, so Muhoozi in this leadership as the CDF, he has come out
The
strongly.
actual third in command of the Ugandan armed forces after his father
You would
for
think-
the last 20 years. That's why Kanari Mugome correctly says the handover from General Mbadi to General Kainerugaba takes place at the home of General Saleh. How did Muhoozi himself become general, full, five-star general? It was at a
Was
ceremony.
decorated.
By whom?
Saleh.
Retired general. So that's what it is. So in the actual structure of Uganda, if you are like, let's say, a CIA officer taking notes on Uganda and preparing a report to get the facts of where power really is, I repeat, the top 3 army commanders, military commanders in Uganda, effectively, hands-on is Yoweri Museveni, Supreme Commander, Deputy Supreme Commander General Salim Saleh, then third in command and more like operational command is Muhoozi Kainerugaba. In reality, for the last 20 years, all other CDFs just doing what they do with Kanyerengwe chairman of RPF, Kagame vice chairman, Lay chairman, Museveni vice chairman.
You have a CDF right now who has openly come out to challenge the opposition, specifically Robert Chagulanyi and the National Unity Platform, who is going to stand for president to challenge President Yoweri Museveni come 2026. That's written in black and white, it's on the wall. How do you think that election will be with Muhoozi in the leadership of CDF and the father being on the same ballot paper with Robert Chagulanyi?
One, I'd advise you, as Solomon and as the viewers, start keeping an eye on Norbert Mao and Michael Mawanda. Over the next several months, if my sources are not mistaken, there seems to be a plan hatched in State House and given the official face of Ministry of Justice, Constitutional Affairs and Reforms to reform the voting process by which Parliament now elects the president. Yes, like the 1980 election.
That conversation happened some time back.
So it's now quietly developing along the way. I think from the sources I have, the president really got irritated in 2020. He just could not believe and could not accept that from his point of view, he had been reduced to running against, from his point of view, this ganja smoker, these hooligans with Butcherman crowd and whatnot, i.e. Bobby Wine. The whole thought, okay, Besigye, yes, you can say that one, yes, maybe Simogire, but the thought of having to find myself even running against Chagulanyi just got on his nerves. So to him it is, I can't have another election when I am having to respond to that person called Chagulanyi. So the solution seems to be, take us to a parliamentary system. And of course then in that case, he doesn't even need to campaign. I don't know how far that will go, but that's some of the proposal. Then 2, to go to your question, this person who, as I've just explained to you, is technically demoted from his position. You know, when his MK, I mean, as I said, being in charge of the army for all intents and purposes, he now talking presidential ambitions, politician addressing rallies, is really the highest step he has ever gone. Finally, he's his own man. He's not just another first son, he's his own man. Now his father just pulls a move on him and then takes him back to this heavy work of CDF, where CDF, unlike presidential advisor, you have to be there, all these operations, passing out, basically take him back to a boring desk job. So he's going to be quite frustrated, which is why if you notice when the reshuffle was announced, for about 3-4 days, silence from him on Twitter. It tells you what I'm just telling you. It was just an anticlimax. It is okay. So Mzee has really outmaneuvered me. Now, in that frustration, Muhoozi, who would have wanted to be in the position of taking on Chagulanyi, is now just another CDF and whatnot. The level of violence that SFC and the military police will unleash on the NUP supporters, God help us, is the answer to your question. It would be a case of, I should be out there, as in this was supposed to be me. Now here I am just taking orders. So there will be a lot of this irritation. It will be pushed out on the opposition. Soldiers will almost be commanded to go and vote the president. It will be that kind. It will be the violence of 2021 times 2.
Isn't that a test that he has to pass, because he comes into this office in what some have described as a professional army, whose job as the army is to protect Uganda and its territorial integrity? Do you foresee him putting all the professionalism aside to ensure against all odds that his father goes through? I mean, you mentioned that there's going to be a reign of terror.
As we now agree, surely, after this many minutes we've been talking, he joins the army through the back door. They just create the title, he was an LDU. You remember, if you've read through the documents, the way he joins the army to go Sanders in 1999, the way he goes Sanders is they claim he's an LDU. Only soldiers from an established army got Sanders. So as usual, the usual way of them 70s, they create something, claim he was an LDU, that's how he goes Sanders. And all his life has been that way. He does things which generals can do. He, as I just said earlier, if I'm wrong, just ask people to contradict me. Generals have been saluting this man since he was a lieutenant colonel. Then obviously, that's behind the scenes. But in public, 2 whole years of Muhoozi breaking every single rule and norm and protocol of the armed forces. Is that the person who's been defying his father, doing things which if any other army officer or army general did a tenth of what he did, all those birthdays, all those tweets, one statement by Henry Tumukunde in 2005 on
Put him before the military court martial.
Just that for 8 years or something is under house arrest. And this is a person whose wife is a cousin to the first lady. That's why Tumukunde is even at house arrest. Tell me of any other brigadier, colonel, or major general who do what Muhoozi does, even a tenth of it, and get away with it. So how does that Muhoozi then become the CDF enforcing the law of the army? So you sit in the high command meetings, what do you say? So people stop drinking, and everyone is going to start smiling. I noticed some of the officers have begun drinking, and everybody's smiling to themselves. Look who is talking. All of you should obey what?
Don't beat civilians.
The law says don't get involved in politics. The very life of Muhoozi of the last 2 weeks that we've all seen publicly runs against the armed forces. So the contradictions are clear to be seen. So it's going to be that sort of thing. He will know he's on the defensive. Every time he makes statements and warns soldiers to behave well, he knows that everyone is saying, yes, but look at you. So with that complex, it's going to be, come hard on them and all these things.
Let's talk about the changes. I mean, again, let's stay within the army. You remove General Erelu, and some have described it as an act of betrayal by President Museveni. I've had so many people saying General Museveni wants to make it all easy for General Muhoozi Kainerugaba's tenure as CDF within the army, because General Erelu has come out clearly, has been on parallel with him. There was also the thing that you mentioned earlier, General Mbadi's authority and the whole grumbling within the army. Both of these 2 people are out. And clearly now, with the establishment book that was recently launched by President Museveni, most of the powers within the UPDF are now run, like they're vested under one person, which is the CDF. And that makes him to be in charge of a key installation of government that controls the very governance process of this country. Would you think that the dropping of General Erelu as deputy CDF is an act of betrayal by President Museveni?
Well, I don't know about betrayal of what, but it is, well, considering how loyal Will has been. But as we now know, that meeting in Ntungamo in July 2022 was called partly to address the tensions that had been developing in the army and the friction between Elwelu and Muhoozi Kainerugaba. And I'm sure, this is just speculation, that I guess one of the conditions would have been, yes, but if I'm going to be CDF, I can't work with that man. It's like, okay, fine, I'll remove him. But so to that degree, it looks like a betrayal, but that had to be a way of solving the problem. If the CDF and his deputy can't see eye to eye, we already have enough friction within State House over this person called Muhoozi. The last thing we need is another round of reports of the two don't talk. So it is sacrifice one for the sake of the bigger piece. But this argument you keep bringing up of the 2021, the new blueprint for the army and the powers being vested in the CDF, Solomon. The powers of state mean the prime minister as head of government. Do you really think Robin Onabanja is the prime minister in the way we think of prime minister? Do you really think Jessica Lupo is the vice president? It goes back to the Kazora statement. Do you really think Katumba Wamala was a CDF in real terms when he was? And once again, do you think that Muhoozi needs this statute, the military blueprint, to have those powers? He already had those powers before. Once it becomes clear to you and to us that under Museveni, Uganda, your powers are not determined by the official title and the structure, the corporate structure. It is determined by relationships, which is why the First Lady has this convoy following her everywhere, which didn't happen with Miriam Obote as the First Lady and whatnot. It's just that. Actually, I should have given you a command structure of Uganda of where does Janet Museveni fit in all of this. The true power for Museveni is that relationship of people. It is people to people. It is Saleh is my person, loyalty and some weight around him. He is the center of the will and the rest are spokes that come around him. And family relationships are what matter. The minister in charge of Luero is Alice Kawoyo, not so, but Alice Kawoyo is a cousin of Janet Museveni. So yes, on the face of it, she is just another ordinary minister out there, Luero, but really, she is the one who, if you remember, or if you go through the papers in the 1999, the woman who did much of the shopping for the wedding of Muhoozi Kainerugaba. Alice Kawoyo might have more power in that cabinet than the vice president and the prime minister combined, which is why you might remember when Muhoozi's birthday party takes place at the State House, the prime minister has to be there and all this. You saw generals senior to Muhoozi having to be there and clap and all this. It's a ridiculous system, but it works for Museveni. So please take it out of your mind, this idea of the structures, the instruments, the powers of that power has been with Muhoozi since he was a lieutenant colonel.
Let's talk about the reshuffle. What do you make of the reshuffles within cabinet?
So since we have now discussed that the move announced last week was to disband this thing called PLU that was causing so much trouble in Museveni's family, then you had to take away the operations officer of the PLU, but then not to humiliate Muhoozi. See, the trouble is that that family, like I've been saying on social media and on KFM, the tensions in 1985-84 that led to the 1985 coup were between the Acholi and Langi officers, the Catholic Acholi officers, and then the Langi officers. That's what causes the coup. We don't have that equivalent in Uganda, but because the real center of power in 80 to 85 was a UNLA. The real center of power, the equivalent under Museveni, is the first family, believe it or not. It's not anybody else, it is the first family. That's why, please don't think when the speaker goes to Bukedia, home village, and starts talking all these things about we believe in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. This is a Catholic woman. This is Lent. And you're basically speaking from Christianity. You're speaking blasphemy in front of the president. And the president is just watching without shame and whatnot. It's telling you that the real power. When you see that new hospital in Bukedia named MK Wing, Natasha Wing, I don't know, whatever wing. She's not being a buffoon. She's not being silly. She reads the mood right. Those names that the wings were named after, that's the real power. When Gilbert Bukenya becomes the vice president in 2005, who did he first thank? He thanked the president, and then he also thanked Moses Berhanga, the president's assistant. Moses Berhanga, presidential assistant, how does that come into it? Yes, with Museveni, a receptionist at one of the hotels in Kampala could be officer number 16 in CMI. There's no structure. So to answer your question, to placate, there's tension. Okay, let me put it this way here. I hope they don't come for me. There's tension between the pro-Muhoozi part of the first family with, I think, Saleh as the head of it. He's very sympathetic to his nephew, affection and all this. Then there's another wing that is like, Shah, the way he's been behaving and embarrassing us, no way. Let it be Odrek. So to placate his family, he has to essentially tame Muhoozi without humiliating him and the pro-Muhoozi wing of his family. And that means you then get Muhoozi's people, break them up from this PLU, but also seem to appoint them. So to answer the question, the cabinet reshuffle is really just a cabinet clean out. It's creating places to solve the Muhoozi problem. And so in comes Balaam, in comes Lillian, in comes whoever. So others must go out to bring in these people to end the Muhoozi movement. So the others are collateral damage.
The other way to look at it is that they have brought these directly to do mobilization underground. I mean, the position of Balaam.
Yes, but if you know Balaam...
He's now in charge of young people.
Yes, but if you know Balaam, and if you know mobilization, and if you know the idea of a full-time job, and this whole question of, collective responsibility in cabinet, if you know Balaam's life in the world of music and concerts, it actually makes him less effective. He already owns a radio station, Radio 4. When does he get time to run that station? Then 2, when does he get time? As I said, if you're going to be calling all these all-day meetings, when do you get time to do all that mobilization? It actually cripples him. Balaam was most effective in that state, that Frank Gashumba world of, sort of semi-businessman, semi-free agent, can go ahead of Muhoozi for 2 weeks and do the mobilizing. But if he has to be reporting for weekly cabinet meetings, it disables him. If you talk about Museveni as a shrewd person, Museveni has pulled a cunning move on his son by breaking up the system, absorbing key people of our PLU into the cabinet. 1, to then defang them. 2, tie them down to those day jobs. And then in the army, do the same. Take Muhoozi there, tie him down to that full-time CDF job where this joke of presidential advice isn't there. My friend, if there's a passing out parade, you must be there. So time is going to go by. Just watch the next few months. You just start noticing there are no more rallies. There's no more PLU mobilized in charge of anything. That's the answer. So the reshuffle, which seems to be like to make things more effective. Like I said, Museveni takes us like balloons. Uganda is just his bouncing castle. We're all just these children up and down on this. There's hot air under this thing called the bouncing castle. We're just clowns on it. So if Solomon is the person who's going to bring all the youth vote from Soroti or Teso at large, and it is true, Solomon is the key to Teso, he will create a so-called reshuffle, kick out somebody for Solomon to come in. It really was. He was just creating seats in the bus for those ex-PLU people to sit. So the others are damaged, and take Muhoozi there, keep him busy, and then everyone else becomes damaged. And what's the remedy for them? Find them any slots, whoever, it doesn't matter. He knows people don't really work anyway in Uganda. As long as you have your driver, fuel, per diem, allowances, that's what you live for anyway. Semi-command, but that's the way it works.
Interesting, Tim. You get a spotlight and flash for me into 2026. What do you see?
Let's say best case scenario, or let's say the usual story we know. Usual story, all state machinery under the usual suspects, those 3 musketeers I've mentioned who actually ran the army. Everything said and done, the results of the last general election since 1996 will be the same ones. Every commissioner, every human being at the Electoral Commission is appointed by President Museveni, trembles under President Museveni. The ones who somehow made it possible for NUP to get registered in 2021 were all sacked. your Anderson Burora, who comes out to speak against the corruption in parliament, is fired for speaking out against corruption. When you see all that happening, what happens? Of course, everybody trembles even more. So that Saturday in 2026, when the results are being announced, it is going to be Yoweri Museveni, the winner. But what happens between now and then? Nope has kind of dodged a bullet. This Mpuga crisis has both helped them and hurt them. It's hurt them in the sense of what we saw of UPC and FDC, the breakup. But I guess fortunately for Noop, it's come early enough for them, not too close to the election, for people to get fed up. So in a sense, it's been a bit like the way you put in this, chicken pox vaccine to trigger the immune system. So maybe the cleanup they'll do right now will mean any future no person, no more hobnobbing with NRM people, no more talk of money. And yesterday, Mpuga holds a press conference at Parliament and affirms he's still part of NOP, which tells you that even if he's angry with what they've done to him as his colleagues in NOP, where else can he go? If he goes to NRM, he's finished politically in Masaka. And if you look around, there's no second force in Uganda except NOP, for better, for worse. So he has to dig in. And then also, quickly to come to a bit of NOP, NOP's problem in 2021 was most parts of Uganda have this suspicion of Baganda. You know the cliches, Baganda thieves, Baganda ABC and whatnot, Baganda full of themselves and all this. That's why NOP is really very heavily Buganda, and at the presidential level a bit of Busoga. And the biggest challenge facing the NOP people, which they were lazy about, was how to break out of this Lake Victoria, Buganda, Busoga terrain and stretch out beyond, stop the image of NOP equals Zambogo, NOP equals Kabaka Yeka party, so to speak. So I guess from a certain point of view, the way Kyagulanyi, it's not been advisable, it's not been well done, but the way Kyagulanyi has come down hard on Mpuga and the rest of the NOP leadership, some indirectly might get a few people outside of Buganda, eastern, northern, western Uganda, to think, these people actually have some degree of principle. They're not just some hooligans from the ghetto who came in just to make money. They actually seem to believe in something. When they turn against the fellow Muganda from that sensitive place called Masaka, and they're really so hard on him, when you'd expect them to be shielding him like the way Museveni does, he's one of us, after all, the Museveni is corrupt. When they said, no way, principle is principle, truth is truth, if you took the money, resign, it's created a positive effect. It's caused some tension in Buganda, where NOP has a stronghold, but it's made people who have been hesitating to vote Kyagulanyi think, okay, this seems to be a nationalistic person. This seems to be a party who's submitted. So I guess if they solve this problem quickly, because they're running out of time to start spreading beyond Buganda, if they solve it by the end of May and spend the remaining 6 months of this year beginning to make a visible presence outside of Buganda, get into the Bantu-speaking parts of eastern Uganda, then they will come in, they'll still remain second party, maybe stronger than before, but the final result will still be announced by Museveni, unless we do one of these Tunisia, Algeria things. We all just rise up in some general walk to work, and the house comes down.
All right, from what you're saying, President Museveni will be handing over to President Museveni in 2026.
But none of us saw 9/11 coming. Anything can happen. Like every time, even the president was on the presidential jet, before they take off, they always say, in case of any accident or crisis, there's a life jacket under your seat. So I'm sure even a presidential jet can come down in a storm.
Let's use that very scenario. In case President Museveni doesn't wake up, what's that life jacket?
The life jacket, well, it depends. If he just goes to sleep and then people come and call him for breakfast and he's not responsive, and they come in and tap him and he's not responsive, and as in like he's dead or something, to put it crudely, then what happens? The first thing will be they will...
Jessica Lupo.
No. The first thing will be they will call the first lady, inform her, inform the children, then inform General Saleh. General Saleh is flown to Entebbe or wherever it happens to be. They sit and have a family meeting and then see what to do. In that family meeting, they decide, okay, we don't want to antagonize people across the country and international opinion. what we do, let's have an intermediate period. So let's go by what seems to be the official thing. So they will do exactly what you said. The army is basically disarmed, high state of alert. Unit after unit, all the guns are collected. The mechanized units are all disabled. The tank commanders are all taken into one place for a week. And there will be no attempted coup. Then somebody comes on the state, then they follow what seems to be official structure. This is to announce, like what happened in Tanzania. The president died and all these things. In the meantime, we're wondering, somehow the internet won't be switched off because then there'll be suspicion. We haven't seen the president in public for 4 days. The internet is off, something is cooking. So I guess they'll just slow the internet down to make it impossible for us to work. But at the same time, we can't claim it's been switched off. And then quickly take charge, announce Alupo as the vice president following normal procedure. And the country settles down, all the fears of family succession have gone away. And then in that intermediate period of 6 months heading toward an election, I suspect strongly Janet Museveni can surprise you by coming out as presidential candidate, or somebody from the first family will be fronted as a presidential candidate to begin canvassing for support. And then there's a general election after that, and that person becomes the new head of state.
You don't see the army taking over?
They can't take over because your friend has been the crafty person from day one. Thomas Sankara was assassinated a year and a half after he took power in October 87. So from the very beginning, that question of can't you see the army taking over is the thing that Museveni thinks about every single day. That man who sleeps at 4 a.m. or whatever time he sleeps. So look around. Every time Mugisha Muntu is going for a campaign rally, who meets him? DPC, Sam Asimwe. Bobby Wine goes to Mbale, and which DPC stops him? I don't know, to Mwesije. If you notice, the same ethnic group seems to be in charge of all the police stations all over the country. In Abim, in Zombo, in wherever, there's always some Kalyegira or Himsi, where there's always a Birungi, there's always a Tunamasiko. So look around, army takes over, relatives take over, no relatives don't take over. So the army can't take over. It's not a professional army. It's a loyalist army. It's what Obote in 1990 described as a Praetorian Guard. It's Museveni's army. Muhoozi rightly says on Twitter, I want my army back. It is the army.
Thank you very much, Tim, for sharing your thoughts.
All views I've expressed on this show, the one to arrest is Solomon.
I'm Solomon Serwanja. I've been speaking with Timothy Kalyegira, political analyst and journalist, also CEO at the Kampala Express. This is The Hard Questions.